All right, let's welcome into Straight Fire a guy who's really blown up on the scene this last year and change. He is an NFL insider. It's weird. You guys have heard the Warren Buffett quote when everybody be aggressive when everybody's being fearful and be fearful when everyone's being aggressive or something along those lines. Well, everybody's running away from being a sports insider in the media now. Jordan Schultz is running into it. He's now the Fox NFL insider. Jordan, how you doing, man?
J-Mac, I would be doing better if I was hooping with you in SoCal, but other than that, pretty smooth, pretty
Yeah.
smooth.
I met Jordan for the first time about, I don't know, a year ago, once he started coming on the herd, and he knew I liked hoops, and I didn't realize he played hoops at a high level. Let's start there. So you were what, a dominant high school player, and then you went D2?
I had a good high school career, really
Where
good
was
high
this?
school career in Seattle.
Where'd you go? Like, did you play with those twins?
A lot and Rod.
Yeah, yeah.
No, they were a year or two older. I played against them a lot.
Oh,
But the Seattle basketball scene was and is super strong. Our best one was in our AU program. We had Brandon Roy, who was the best of everyone.
wow.
And so I grew up playing with Brandon from the time I was, probably like basically 14 to 18. And so I got a really good sense early on of like what an NBA basketball player is. I mean, we had Martell Webster in the gym, Marvin
Mm.
Williams, Nate Robinson, Jamal Crawford. So I saw what an NBA player was, and I knew I wasn't that. But I had one definable skill. I could shoot the shit out of the ball. And when you can shoot, even if you're as limited as I was, you have a role. And
Yeah.
so, and in high school, like shooting is it's such a special skill to have that you're going to just score. And so I scored a lot of points. And our team was really good my senior year. We went to the state tournament. We went downstate for the first time in school history. And so I had that experience and ended up going to Seattle U as an invited walk-on, which was D2, and then now is D1. They were basically transitioning at the time. So it was a good level of basketball, really good level. And I wasn't quite where I thought I was. And I ended up redshirting. And then my sophomore year, my second year, I came back and I was in great shape and I thought I would have played some and then ended up basically tearing up my whole foot, my whole ankle.
Oh.
And that basically torpedoed that. And then after that, J-Mac, I ended up transferring close to you. I went to Occidental College, which was probably more where I should have been in the first place, just a really good Division III school. But my lifelong dream was to be a Husky. Like I wanted to go to UW more than anything in the world. But, because Romar was always around, he basically told me, like, if you come here, you won't really ever play. And I couldn't stomach that. And
Of course
so,
not. Yeah.
And basketball was my life. I was, I was slow. I wasn't athletic. I couldn't jump. I had the lowest vertical leap in the history of Seattle U basketball.
Wow.
I couldn't jump.
So wait, what's your NBA comp? Were you like a Jason Capono?
That's exactly right. Except Jason Capono is like 6'8".
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You're
but
what?
that's it. Like, always find a spot. I mean, even like Kyle Korver, like, 6'7", 6'8",
Yeah.
come off screens. Like I was a really great standstill shooter. And I could pass a little bit and use the ball screens relatively well. But I was just so slow. Like I wasn't explosive. And as hard as I worked at it, I was never able to get, as my dad would say, the necessary foot speed. I had what we call heavy feet. And I would joke with my son because I'm like, heavy feet is the death of an athlete. You just don't want to have it. And that's what I had. So I ended
what's
up
the saying? Is it slow feet don't eat? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Or speed kills. And obviously I had neither. And so I'd say my career was kind of marginal. Like I had some huge games in college because, I could get hot and make 7 threes in a game, but I just never was able to consistently like put it together because of how limited I was. And I think if I had different iterations of my career, I like to think that I had like the worst version of it, but who knows?
Yeah, no, that's fun. So, but I guess my thing is, obviously everybody knows your background, who your dad is, Starbucks, all that, and you're playing Division II, Division III basketball. You come out of school and did you want to go into sports media? Was that
I always did, man. It was like the one thing I always knew I wanted to do. I felt like growing up that I was at a really young age very aware of the fact that my dad was wealthy. I didn't really know to what extent, but I also knew that that wasn't my passion and my dream. When I was like 15 or 16 years old, I sat down with my parents at home and I basically told them, like, I don't think I can pursue the family business. I don't think that's what I can do. It's not going to be my passion. And much to my relief, they were super supportive of it. And I think they always knew. Like, they basically told me we already knew that. And I remember asking, how did you know, or why? And they said, because you were always the kid that was obsessed with devouring the New York Times sports section or the Seattle Times sports. Like, that's all you ever wanted to do. You always wanted to play sports. If I had a ball, I mean, I was way better at baseball, but basketball was cooler. And it was what I really loved to do. But sports was my life at a really young age. And then obviously when I was 14 years old, I think it was my 8th grade year, maybe. Yeah, 8th grade, my dad bought the Sonics. And so I had a really firsthand look at like what pro sports was. And I think that shaped me in a big way.
Yeah. So do you have, I'm trying to think, who were the Sonics
that we had?
Was that the end of the Gary Payton era or no?
Yeah. So we had Gary. We ended up the best move we ever did, which was also the most controversial, was we traded Gary Payton for Ray Allen, which was a really great trade because Ray was like in his prime, 27 years old. I think he led the league in scoring for us one year. And Gary was an older, slower point guard. And basically what happened was you had a really tough decision to make, which was not only to trade Gary, who was an icon, but also the player that my dad really loved was Desmond Mason. They had a great relationship. And I don't know if you remember him, he won the dunk contest.
Oh, dunking machine from Oklahoma State.
He was a machine. And he was a good player, but he was never going to be an all-star. And what I noticed was my dad had the hardest time ever making that trade because he was so attached to Desmond the person. And he got too attached. He kind of crossed that proverbial line that as an owner you don't want to cross. You still have to make those business decisions. And the NBA, the NFL, these are businesses. And he didn't want to make the deal up until the very final hour because he was so committed to Desmond. He ended up doing it. It broke him in half to make that trade. It killed him because he felt so badly. But he made the move, and we got Ray Allen, who was, a phenomenal player and a great person, and really became the face of our franchise up until the point we sold it.
Dude, that would be so cool. Your dad buys an NBA. So you were like courtside every night? Was that
most games. We had the 4 best seats in the house. We were right center court.
Taking a lot of girls there on dates, like, hey,
always, yeah. But it was, to be fair, it was more like my buddies because I wasn't cool enough yet. Like 14 to 20, I wasn't quite cool enough to like take girls necessarily, but I would take my buddies. And also what was really dope was as I was coming of age in high school and I became, a fairly decorated high school player and played in college, like I would go to the facility and work out with all the guys. So I'd work out with Rashard Lewis. Like when Rashard Lewis was negotiating his deal, which I think was a max 77 over 7 deal, he was coming over to the house and we were playing horse. And I remember I beat his ass in horse 2 times. And my dad was like, Rashard, I mean, all due respect, like, I'm going to pay you this money. You can't beat my son in horse. I mean, guys playing D2 basketball. I don't think this is a good sign. So I got a really good look at like what pro sports was and also like how much of an impact it had on our family. It was, our team was good. We were never great. We never broke through, I think, the second round. And when we sold the team, it was a tough time. I mean, Seattle sports fans are super passionate and Sonics fans are like next level. And it was tough. And then the team moved a year later and, the rest is history. I do believe wholeheartedly that the city will get a team back within the next 3 years or so.
So all this NBA, I'm surprised you went the NFL route as an insider as opposed to NBA. Because it sounds like you love hoops.
Yeah, I love basketball. It's always been sorry, let me just get rid of this one sec. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah, this is the life of an NFL insider. He's got to bang out tweets about breaking news in the middle of a podcast. Like that's the life you choose.
No, I know. And normally, like if this wasn't free agency, the precursor to free agency week, it wouldn't be like that. But just the phone.
Well, we won't post this until tomorrow. So was that anything of consequence?
this is more stuff of like what's gonna. I'll tell you off the air. This is more of like what's to come. It's not.
Oh,
I'm not. But who knows? I mean, this has been a crazy day already. We had the DK trade request. We had Crosby get paid. We had Bond get paid. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and everyone's getting set for free agency. But no, basketball was. I always wanted to do hoops, and what I felt like was I didn't have enough space. There wasn't enough space. There wasn't enough white space in the NBA. The rosters were too small. The coaching staffs, the executives, just weren't enough people for me to break in. And so what I did was I pivoted, and I remember having a conversation with Max Kellerman, who was a good buddy of mine. I was at ESPN, and I was doing sports betting. I was doing that sports betting show on ESPN2 like 3 days a week. I was doing college basketball, like columns, features. I was all over the map. And I did First Take with Max, and he told me, listen, the producers like you, but they don't really know what to make of you. Are you a generalist? Are you basically an insider who's dancing around different sports? Are you a feature writer? Are you a gambling guy? And so all of that came to a head, and I realized what I need to do is I need to make a decision. And I don't think it's going to be in basketball. I don't think I'm going to have enough momentum here. It's too crowded. And so what I did was I pivoted to the NFL, knowing that the roster sizes were much bigger, 53 compared to 12. Coaching staffs, executives, just much more ammo to attract. And as a result, I think what I did was I started to look at like, I'm probably not going to get like the A's and B's, but if I can hit a couple singles, hit a double, and that's what led to, that was 2022. And then in 23 started to have more success, a fair amount. And then last year I felt like I really was able to ascend to like 2 or 3 levels up. And with that in mind, I was able to land the opportunity at Fox, which was, quite honestly, a total game changer for me. And you mentioned going on Herd, like that stuff to me before was foreign. And then so to have someone like Colin, as you know, like champion you and support you, especially at a place like Fox, made and continues to make a really big difference.
Wow. Yeah. So you go into NFL, and listen, obviously, and I experienced this with the website way back, the Big Lead. Like people just don't respect you at the beginning, right? You got to earn it, obviously, which I understand. And did you run into any of that? Like, reporters being jerks to you, agents big timing, teams not returning your calls. Was that like a pretty common thing early on?
I would say not returning calls for sure. Who are you? Why do I need to talk to you? Never heard of you. A lot of that. More so, teams was probably a little bit harder to crack than agents, because at least with agents, like you can see them on Instagram, you can DM them. It's a little bit more attainable. There's, I don't know if access is the right word, but it's just like it's more visible. But like teams, it's really hard to get a head coach or a GM or a personnel director to return your call. That to me is probably more word of mouth, and agents to a degree as well. But if you hit up, let's say 10 agents, like there's a decent chance that you can get on the phone or get texting with like 2 or 3 of them. And of those 2 or 3, like maybe one of them you can create a genuine relationship with. But to answer your question, like it's not easy to create relationships out of thin air. And when you're not a name at all, a household name by any stretch, in the whole like stratosphere of NFL reporting, insider game, it's really tough. Also, like a lot of the other insiders, to their credit, have relationships that date back 10 years or decades. And I was coming in really green, not really knowing the landscape, and also not having the name credibility or the relationship. So it took some time, but I think, I always look at like what the breakthrough was for me. I don't know if I could point to any specific moment, but one thing that really helped me, one moment that really helped validate me, was about 2.5 years ago when Gronk retired. He had me put it out. And I had developed this great relationship with Rob over the course of maybe a year or so. And then I remember about 6 months or so before he retired, I told him, listen, I don't know what you're going to do, but when the time comes, I would love to be the one who announces your news. And we had stayed really friendly. And sure enough, I'd almost forgotten about it. And then sure enough, I'll never forget. He calls me and texts me, and he's like, I'm ready to make the decision, or I made the decision. I'm ready to have you put it out. I'm going to retire. And I was really surprised because I thought he was going to keep playing. But that validated me, because not only did I get to announce it, J-Mac, but I also got to say, like, Gronk tells me,
Yeah.
and then I think he reposted it. And I just remember, like, a lot of agents and some teams saying, okay, like, I remember that. And they saw that, and that helped, you know, it just helped me get to another level. And then once
Yeah.
you get to a certain point, you just have to use that momentum while you have it and really strike.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool of Gronk to do something like that. I mean,
Yeah, it was
you know,
awesome.
I totally get like it takes a little while. Do you think your background, obviously, you know, do you think that helped or hurt? Oh, this is some rich guy's kid,
Yeah,
or did it
no, of
help? Like,
course.
oh wow, I know I love Starbucks, you know, that kind of deal.
I don't know. I feel like, some, so as at a young age, I think I was really aware too. I mentioned earlier of the fact that our family had money, and as I came of age, Starbucks also came of age. If you
Yeah,
think about the company going public in the early '90s, and by the late '90s, early 2000s, when I'm in high school or middle school, like that's so the company and me are simultaneously growing. Like it was a weird. It's kind of a hard thing to digest as a kid, and I remember thinking like, does this person want something from me? Is that why they're being my friend? Like that was really on my mind. And my parents were really adamant about making genuine friends and making sure I was aware of what people's ulterior motives were going to be, especially as I got older. And so I think for me, to answer your question, I think in many ways it helped because there was some name recognition. And then I think in some ways it did hurt in terms of there were certain teams, there were certain agents that just said, I don't want to deal with you, and just made, a blanket statement or I should say, a blanket, not observation, but they just assumed, okay, this
yeah,
guy comes from that. I don't want to deal with that. That's not my type of person. To which I completely respected. And ironically, some of those, maybe half of those people, I've now developed relationships with because I
yeah.
was persistent. And there was a fine line between being persistent and respectful, but I think, respectfully persistent to keep trying. And then obviously, like you do want the word of mouth. Like this guy, maybe you have a relationship with an agent at a certain agency, and you're trying to get someone that he works with, and that person's not interested. But then you have the word of mouth. Hey, this guy's okay. So
Yeah.
by and large, I do feel like it probably helped, and I'm also really aware of that because I've tried so hard to navigate my own, wanting to. A big reason why we moved to New York was because I wanted to just get out of the Seattle bubble. It's my
Mm,
name has way too much name recognition there. It's not a big city, and Schultz and Starbucks like goes a long way. And I
yeah.
just felt like I needed to get out of that, and that's a big reason why we came to New York. And I think it's by and large been the right decision. Although I've always said at some point like I would want to go back to the West Coast and live there. But that's where we're at. And I would just finish by saying that, I never wanted people to just, I didn't want people to know where I came from and to know how I grew up. And so at some point, there was this level of being ashamed. And I think
Oh,
that was really unhealthy for me. And I would say that was more like in my late 20s, early 30s. I just turned 39. And at some point over the last few years, I think I've been able to navigate past it.
mm.
But that was something that I struggled with.
Wow. The honesty there, man. That's pretty cool. Listen, we all struggle with this stuff. I'm sure some people were like, dude, you didn't want to be the heir to Starbucks? Are
Dude,
you
all
out
the
of your
time.
mind?
If the combine, like you go to Senior Bowl or the Super Bowl, it always comes up.
Yeah. And they're like, wait, you
People
want
are,
to chase Max Crosby
yeah,
signings
yeah, exactly.
over just like rule over this massive
I know,
billion-dollar empire?
especially with people that aren't privy to it, and then they find out, and that's oftentimes their first question, or one of their first questions is, why wouldn't you just pursue the family business? And I think, I listen, like I've had this conversation many times with my parents, and especially my dad. Like in theory, I'm sure he would have loved to have had his son take over, and I think the time would have been now, like mid 30s, late 30s, as he retired.
Yeah.
But I also think he knows that he would have shown a side of him to not only me but to my sister as well, who's 3.5 years younger. That we would have seen a side of him that we didn't really see growing up. We saw an
Mm,
intensity, but I think being in that world with him would have been would not have been particularly healthy for us or
yeah.
for him or for our relationship. And that is something that I'm grateful not to have experienced, because I always wanted my parents to be that, you know.
All right, let's buzz through a couple players in the combine real quick. So the Shedeur Sanders stuff.
Yeah,
Listen, man, I don't know how many mock drafts you look at, but I saw somebody had him at 21, somebody had him at 29. I can't tell if this is some kind of smear campaign or what. What are you genuinely hearing from people you trust and respect about just Shedeur Sanders interviews at the combine?
I think depending on which team you ask, you still get a fair amount of clubs that will flip flop on who they would prefer. But at this point, it does feel like pretty. I would say there's a strong connotation coming out of Indianapolis last week that Cam Ward is rated ahead of Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah.
But what I don't like and what's frustrating is you mentioned there's been this sort of smear campaign with Shedeur, and that's hard because I'm not in those interviews. I'm not in those interviews. But what I have been told is that he came across as affable, intelligent, and someone that really understands like pro football. He's been immersed in it his whole life. And in terms of like your prototypical drop back passer, he's the most accurate guy in the draft. He's not the athlete of a Cam Ward. I don't think he has the same level of arm strength, but he can make throws, all the throws. And, you know, one of the things that I think came out of the combine was that Shedeur Sanders doesn't care about what teams think of him. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I feel like I was there and talking to people that whole week, and I feel like I would have heard that, and I just didn't hear it. So that's where I'm at. I think a lot of time and a lot of things can happen from now until the draft. But I don't see him slipping into the 20s. That just feels way too low.
No shot. But that was only like the second biggest story of the combine. Have you been asked by everybody, including family and friends, about the incident with Rapoport at a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever?
I have. I mean, everybody's asked me. I know you texted me when it happened. Like Fox, there was friends at Fox, longtime family friends, kids, like guys I grew up with. I mean, everybody was asking, and
that's crazy.
I would love to. I would love to just move past it. Like that's all I want to do. And you know, the timing now with free agency is like, I'm hoping that with free agency it'll be productive, and you know we can move past it. But yes, like my phone, especially those 3 days, was a lot.
Yeah, listen, I know Rapoport. I find him to be a nice guy. I can imagine that it gets a little intense on the reporting front. But what did you make of people making jokes about it, like Adam Schefter chiming in?
Well, I've always had a great relationship with Adam. You know, like really good, dating way back to pre ESPN days, pre NFL days. Oh. I thought that was hilarious. I ran into him a few minutes after. I thought it was a funny thing to do, and because he took the photo and then he posted it head on a swivel, and I ran into him like, I don't know, an hour later, and I was texting and I just said, you know, and so when I ran into him, I said, you know, of course, like you would, because Adam is funny. He's dry, but he's funny. And it was like, it definitely like took up a lot of the space in Indianapolis. And I didn't necessarily anticipate that. But
were teams chiming in?
Some teams asked about it. And some agents asked, and I just tried to downplay it as much as possible. Yeah. I just try to be honest. Like I thought I got blown out of proportion. That's really all.
It's not a huge deal. Right.
But it is competitive. Like I think, you know, news breaking regardless of space, you know, basketball, obviously, like you remember always like the Woj and Shams back and forth. Obviously NFL. I don't know how much baseball, but I would imagine like even the political landscape, political reporting is pretty competitive. So
oh hell yeah.
It is a competitive landscape without question.
Let's go through a couple players real quick to wrap up here. DK Metcalf demands a trade. A, does he get the trade? And B, is it anyone other than the Chargers?
So he requested a trade, and I don't know if Seattle's going to move him or not, because the asking price is going to be significant, as it should be. A guy
like a third round pick, conditional second?
More. I think more. I think more than a third. I haven't gone there yet, but that feels light to me. If you think about DK Metcalf, you know, 27 years old, has been a Pro Bowler,
but you got to pay him.
Yeah, exactly. So that's I was just going to say, whoever trades for him, if a trade happens, you also then have to extend him, because he only has one more year left on his deal. And so, you know, that's always the hard part. It's not only finding the capital to get the asset, but then go out and pay the guy. And for someone like DK, in that premium position, you're going to have to pay a lot. The Chargers, I know, have been very aggressive. I reported this about an hour ago, going back to over the last year or so. They know they need a number one wide receiver. That has been their priority. Now, they have a great young guy, Lad McConkey, who's been in the slot. But I think the one thing that Justin Herbert hasn't had is that bona fide X receiver, and that's exactly what DK is.
Interesting. Lockett, another Seattle guy.
Yes.
He gets released. I think he's got huge value as a
He does.
culture guy, locker room guy, slot receiver who's going to give you 50 catches, probably a couple clutch third downs in the postseason. Yeah. Any guesses where he might land?
I think with Tyler, you know, I'll put it this. You mentioned like locker room guy. There's no doubt that if you think about Seattle released several players yesterday, and then they gave Tyler Lockett basically his own day today. They announced it, and he announced it by himself. That's because he's been an icon. He's been there about a decade. He's been one of the most consistent guys in the community, in the locker room. He has a real estate business there. He is beloved in Seattle. There will be 5, 6, 7 teams that want to sign Tyler Lockett. You know, I don't necessarily see the Chargers being a fit because they don't need a slot, but yeah. New England is, I mentioned the Chargers, the number one priority is receiver. New England's number one priority is receiver, as well as left tackle. There will be teams, especially playoff clubs, that are looking for that consistent third down guy that's never going to complain about targets, that's going to make plays, not going to have drops. You know, everyone loves Tyler in Seattle, not just in the building, but everyone loves Tyler within that city. So he will have, to your point, a real market. I don't know what that means financially, but he'll have his pick of the litter. And I have no doubt that he will be a first wave guy in terms of free agent wide receivers.
Week 1, 2025 season, Aaron Rodgers is under center for. I mean, I don't buy the Giant stuff as much anymore. I'm sorry.
The Giant, yeah. I tell you what's interesting. I did Max Crosby's pod 2 nights ago.
Okay.
And he said, hey, I'd love to have Aaron in the silver and black.
Yes.
Tell me that I'm great. I feel like that could work. I'm not saying he's a better option than Sam Darnold. But let's say they go after Sam Darnold, doesn't work out, wouldn't Aaron Rodgers be at least like a decent bridge for them?
A bridge to where? Hell? I mean, I can't get into Aaron Rodgers business.
We have to preface it by saying you're a Jet fan. So, the last 2 years.
Not fun. Not fun.
Yeah.
Let's see who else is out. Oh, the Dak got his contract reworked. Not a huge shock.
Yeah,
does this mean they're gonna pay Micah Parsons big time, or is he still on the trading block?
No, Micah's gonna get his money this offseason. Obviously, you saw Crosby's deal, and that's usually what happens, especially with the cap going up. Crosby becomes the highest paid non-quarterback ever. Parsons probably is the next highest paid non-quarterback ever. They obviously did CD. They did Dak. They just paid Osa. So Dallas is in a position where I do wonder how aggressive they'll be in free agency, because obviously they had 3 straight 12-win seasons, go to the playoffs, and last year was a debacle. But I don't see a scenario where Dallas is like a huge free agent spender, because they never have been. But I do wonder if they'll be, moderately aggressive. Teams in terms of spending money. I mean, there's a lot of clubs out there with cap. I mean, Cincinnati right now has $70 million in cap. Nobody has more cap than New England. Washington has a lot of space. Obviously, they just got Debo, but I expect this to be a very active free agency class, even if it's not as strong a class as we've had the last 2 or 3 years.
Devontae Adams, does he go back to the Raiders, back to the Packers? I saw some dumb gambling odds where he could go back.
I saw the Packers were the favorite, right?
That's not happening.
No, I don't see that. I would imagine he wants to go back west, play in hot weather, play in warm weather, play with a quarterback that he's comfortable, familiar with.
Chargers?
I was gonna say, like, think about the Chargers. Obviously, he doesn't know Herbert, but again, like, you're talking about a guy that is the best, or one of the best release dudes in the league. And even if Devontae's not running 4.3, 4.4, he was never a speed guy. He's always been a really, really smart, crafty guy. He's a perennial all-pro caliber player. And I asked a scout at the combine, we were going through receivers, and I just said, assuming Devontae gets cut, which he now has, like, what's his value? And he said, like, Devontae Adams is still a number one wide receiver. It's just that you have to know, you don't want to ask him to do crazy, like, shit anymore. He's not going to be necessarily like a 110 catch guy, but 90 catches, 100 catches, plays a lot of snaps. He's in great shape. He's never out of shape. High character. Like, that's, so when I think about that, I think Devontae Adams has to go to a winner. The Chargers, to me, makes a lot of sense. But I could also see a lot of other teams saying, Devontae Adams, that's what we need. We're a player away. I don't see him going necessarily back to the Raiders just because they're not a player away, and obviously didn't go particularly well there.
Last player, Kirk Cousins. Well, I was good. Let me just last three quarterbacks. Justin Fields, do we think staying in Pittsburgh?
I think I could easily see Fields staying. I'm thinking like 1 year, $10 million. They really liked him. Tomlin championed Russ. It went well for a while. I thought, and it was told to me that if he continues to play at this level, Russ, they could give him like some kind of a 2-year extension and really make him the face or one of the face of the offense the next couple of years. Didn't work out. I still think there's a real scenario, a really decent shot, a good shot that Fields ends up back in Pittsburgh. 1 year, $10 million. They were 4-1, I believe, when they benched him. Yeah. Obviously, we know how things went, but they like him there. Tomlin likes him. So
what does that mean for Russell Wilson?
Russell Wilson will have a market, but I think I think just like Aaron Rodgers, though, it's a veteran market. It's a guy who has who's not the same player he was 5 years ago, but still, there was a point last year when Russ was playing good ball. He'll have a market, and if you think about it, there were over 60 quarterbacks, J-Mac, that played last season. 60 guys. So even if you're a backup, you're going to have to play.
Yeah, but Russ doesn't want to be a backup. Come on.
I know, but I'm just saying, there's 5-6 spots where you could go and fight for a starter job.
Jets,
the Jets, Indy. Even the
Indy.
Giants last year, he visited the Giants. So
that's right.
There's enough teams that would be interested, and this is not last year's quarterback class where you had Caleb and May and Jaden, Penix, McCarthy. This is not that class.
But we could wrap up with Kirk Cousins, Jordan. Where is Kirk Cousins going to play next year? Obviously, he will not be the backup in Atlanta.
No, it's not super easy to release him, but I still believe he will be released. That's a tougher one for me because the way things ended last year were so bad, and he was so inept. And when you have the Achilles, as we saw with Rodgers, it's going to take you a long time. And Kirk had a decent stretch last year, but the way things ended, I don't think his is as easy. It's not to say he won't find a home because he will, but I feel like with Cousins, to me, I look at Russ, even a Rodgers, Daniel Jones, who's much younger, 27. Those guys, to me, are going to have an easier time finding a home than Kirk. I do believe he'll be released. I do believe he'll find a home, but I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for him considering how things went last month of the year.
Definitely. All right, Jordan Schultz, Fox Sports NFL Insider. I kept you longer than I know you're busy.
My pleasure.
You're juggling multiple cell phones, but it's good to get to know you. And obviously, we got to hoop at some point. Just got to make sure you're in hoop shape. I don't need you getting injured. I don't need that on my head. I've had enough of those.
So just put me in the corner. Put me on top of the key. I'll set some screens, hit a couple of threes.
Hit some threes.
I'll facilitate.
But that's the thing. I know how to guard those guys. You just hug them up. Don't let them get the ball.
Okay, that's fair. And I know you had RJ. But I am extremely crafty. When I lack in foot speed, I have extremely quick release, high release. Quick trigger. I have a lot of this bullshit. Everything I'm doing is to set you up to shoot a three. They used to call me the pedestrian because I never drove. I think they used to call Stephen A. that I heard as well. I never drove. Everything is facilitated on the three. So it's probably easier to guard me now, yes. But I can still make a few.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. I love hoops. So all right, Jordan, have a good one, man. I'll see you soon.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you.